Broadcasting from Salisbury University campus, this is WSDL Ocean City, NPR News Talk 90.7, putting Delmarva first. Stay tuned for Delmarva Today with your host, Don Rush.
When we think of nonprofits, they may pop up around holiday season with red buckets and ringing bells, but they're an integral part of the community. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. But they also provide some $379 million, or about 14% in the region's total wages. And during the Great Recession, employment in the nonprofit sector actually rose by 11%. But they're also vital beyond just simply the holidays or a national crisis. In our studio this morning is Erica Joseph, president of the Community Foundation of the Eastern Shore, and Pam Gregory, president and CEO of United Way of the Lower Eastern Shore. And welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good morning.
So, give me some sense about just overall the role that nonprofits play. I mean, we see them sort of every day, but we don't really recognize them. I mean, we can see the advertisements for, say, businesses and, sales and that kind of thing, but you don't really see the same thing for nonprofits. Either one.
Well, I think that we often see them in the capacity of fundraising, so events or campaigns, things like that. But nonprofits are around in our daily life. They're a core part of what makes the community strong. So everything from critical human services, Meals on Wheels, to arts and animal welfare, humane societies, things like that. And so what we wanted to highlight through this work was that as nonprofits, we're businesses. We're doing critical economic development work. We employ people. We spend money in the community. We use vendors. And all of that has an impact far beyond just the mission work that we may do, as valuable as that is.
So, define a difference between for-profit and a nonprofit. And I mean, it's obvious that one is seeking, one's seeking a goal of making money, as it were. But do the missions then shift? Does it to the aim of the person who's in charge shift away from this bottom line that you can actually see, right, in a for-profit business as opposed to a nonprofit?
Well, I would say that nonprofits definitely focus on the bottom line too.
Well, there's that too.
Yeah, but I mean, in the for-profit world, you can have organizations that are for-profit. They're very passionate about their mission and their work. And that's very much the same and really what drives the nonprofit industry. Just as Erica said, we are an extension and a part of this community in ways that a lot of people just don't recognize. We're not there just to simply provide services, but we are a vital employer. We're vital to the economy and to be a good business partner in the community. And so by the opportunity that nonprofits have to really focus on, yes, pursuing the mission, but doing so in a very fiscally responsible way is critical. And for nonprofits, we certainly have to focus on fundraising for all of that. We don't have goods or services in most cases that we're selling. We have to make sure that we're engaging with donors and corporations and businesses and sponsorships and writing grants and all the things to make sure that we have the resources that we need, financial and human resources and infrastructure resources to provide those services.
So what are some of the areas that we're looking at? I mean, obviously they deal, I guess, human services, for example. Tell me a little bit about what happens in that sector.
Well, so if you think about human services, it's really the driving force of most of the nonprofit sector. It's usually over half of what a community is familiar with in terms of, fundraising, impact, the number of organizations, everything from programs to serve the aging population to programs to serve at-risk youth to programs that provide crisis support. So, Life Crisis Center, MAC, Habitat for Humanity, all of these types of programs that are bringing housing, health, food, all of the things that are sort of considered to be the basic fundamentals of life. That's what nonprofits in that sector tend to focus on. and many in complementary ways. So you might be serving similar populations, but focused on a particular aspect of their well-being. And we see that across our community. And so overall, nonprofits are employing over 9,200 people in our community. That's a 4-county service area. That's really striking to think about how many of your friends and neighbors are going to work every day in these wonderfully compassionate and compelling mission-based organizations, but who are doing their wage-earning work as a member of a nonprofit.
What about education? What role
Education
they
is definitely a huge focus for our organization. It really is. But we both partner and encourage any of our nonprofit partners to focus in education. And that's not just for the early learners. I mean, that's certainly very critical, but also to make sure that we're extending that to learners of any age. There's adults that have, challenges with learning, and there are still literacy issues in our community. For instance, Project Read at the library through Wicomico Public Libraries is addressing that very need. We have organizations in our community that are doing great work in workforce development training, but sometimes it has to go just beyond learning the job, but also learning how to handle money, learning how to handle the responsibilities that go along with becoming trained in new workforce, opportunities.
And we also think about, some of these organizations and the role they play in the context of what the needs are in the community. And when you think about the Lower Eastern Shore, we live here because we love what it offers, but we have a lot of challenges as well. And education is one of those areas that we continue to recognize that, we need to increase graduation rates. We need to, get to students earlier. We have some makeup to do when we compare ourselves to other parts of the state or other parts of the country. And so nonprofits are a huge link in that aspect as well.
And the nice thing about it, too, is that our nonprofits are really plugged in with the local boards of education and school systems. We're very blessed in this area to have 4 very strong leaders and superintendents and boards of education that support the efforts to improve the education for our children in the public school system. And most of our nonprofit partners that work in education also partner with those organizations. For instance, in Dorchester County, there's a couple nonprofits that do work right inside the school systems to provide mental health care, behavior counseling, as well as even mediation services to help those students learn some of the additional tools that they need, as well as the staff and faculty to learn some of those additional tools that they need to help make sure that's a positive education experience.
And there's also one other area, which is with healthcare. What kind of services do they provide? And now there's a great debate about for-profit hospitals, nonprofit hospitals, so on. What's the advantage here for nonprofits when they get into the healthcare area? Because everybody's talking about healthcare, how expensive it is, and so on.
Well, I think that in an area like ours, which is rural and which has a number of people who are living in poverty or living right at that threshold, I think it's often about access. I think it's often about, can they get transportation to and from appointments? Can they receive services close to home? Are there organizations that can help them navigate? And so many of our nonprofit partners throughout the region, that's been a core focus of theirs. And so, we work at the Community Foundation with Deer's Head to help facilitate transportation costs for dialysis patients. Something as critical as just getting to that life-saving service every day is a huge barrier for folks. We have programs through MAC and others that are going out into the community to help people who have chronic disease, to help them learn how to better manage their diabetes, how to manage some of those illnesses that they're not necessarily going to recover from. So they have to learn and be educated. And so the nonprofits really sort of reach out and do the supportive work that I think the critical care organizations, hospitals, and doctor's office appreciate having that partnership.
Yeah, and we actually have some strong partnerships between the private sector and public sector, if you will. I mean, I think most people consider hospitals a public sector, but they really are. Our local Peninsula Regional Medical System, Atlantic General, are, they're nonprofits and they're important to our community, but they also realize they can't do everything within the confines of their campuses. And so, for instance, we have an initiative that is throughout the local area for Wellness Made Easy. And that's a partnership with our local hospital systems, our health departments, et cetera, to do exactly what Erica's talking about. In addition to the nonprofit partners that we work with, whether it's through funding or collaborations, we're trying to make sure that we're providing tools and access to the community to help them be empowered to take charge of their health care. So they're using the hospital system correctly. They're engaging in primary care. They're taking preventative measures for chronic illness and accessing, those services that they need.
Now, I understand there's really been a real substantial growth over the last decade or so of nonprofits.
Yes.
Why is that? And particularly, I guess, as I was reading, particularly after the Great Recession began in 2008.
It's so interesting to look at, and I think that this was one of the real takeaways for us as employees for a nonprofit, but also huge advocates, was, in times of economic stress, you see that oftentimes there's this, restriction of resources in. We try to save more. And what we saw with the nonprofit sector was in those times, at least in our community, there was, in part because of stimulus grants from federal and state sources, but also we saw within our own organization a generosity come from the community in recognition that those needs were so critical and growing at that time, that staffing and wages and organizational capacity actually went up at the same time that the private sector locally was declining. And so when you think about having a healthy community, having a strong economic base within your community, seeing that counter-cyclical relationship between the types of businesses in your community really demonstrates that having a strong nonprofit sector is not just critical in the moment, but is also important sort of for the long-term sustainability of a strong community.
I mean, are nonprofits in one sense sort of its own safety net for the economic kind of turmoil that we see that passes through one way or another?
I think so, because like during the recession, for instance, there's limited government funding for public services, and so people will certainly turn, and nonprofits will certainly continue to see a rise in the increase and need for services. So we have to turn to one another to help make sure that we can support those services with capacity and, of course, with financial support. But it's, what we've also been seeing is that the opportunity for us to continue to have nonprofits and the government services work together with social services, with, other grant opportunities, and with other organizations that provide public assistance, that really is critical, because just like no one person can solve any problem alone, no one sector can solve it alone, and we have to work together. But the nonprofit sector can be, if you will, a little more flexible. We can react more quickly than in many ways than the government sector maybe could with public services. And, as Erica said, when the recession came and we're seeing an increase in services, we're also seeing an increase in some capacity for nonprofits, but we're also continuing to see that need be very strong. We do have, while overall, many organizations want you to believe that the economy is very strong, and in many ways it is, we're seeing that decrease of the middle class. And we see a significant continued increase in folks that really still struggle to make ends meet. Part of the report is based on some of the data from the ALICE report, which stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed. That was a report that United Ways across the state of Maryland provided to help us understand that we have X number of folks and households living at the poverty level, but we have a substantial number, over 25% more of our households are really still struggling to make ends meet, even though they're working. And for us on the lower shore, that's actually 46% of households are struggling. And so, our food pantry partners see it, our social service partners see it, because people that normally would not have to access services because they don't fit that traditional, mold, if you will, are having to do that. They're having to still make choices between, can I afford my medication or my rent or my food? And it's a challenge.
So Is there any indication as to why there might be some differences between the various counties in terms of the growth of these nonprofits over the last decade or so?
So when we look at our region, one of the recognitions right away is that because we are rural, there tend to be a lot of regional nonprofits that are based in Wicomico County that serve the broader area. So what we see is that program expansion can happen, and it's occurring in all 4 counties, but it's being documented in one or another because of where that organization lives, so to speak. And we see that quite often. Unlike many government services in particular, nonprofits can sort of, be a little more flexible with their service area and aren't necessarily always bound by a specific, geographic line. What we also see is some of the growth that's happening in some of the counties is related to, it might look like explosive growth, but they don't have as many nonprofits. So if somebody really expands or, you add a few organizations, that can look like tremendous growth. But for us overall, what we took away in this study was back to the point of the relationships and the partnerships. The organizations in our community have demonstrated over time that they're strong economically. Most are operating not just at break even, but actually generating surpluses. Many have other types of investments, endowment funds at the foundation or others. And it's part of this sort of 3-legged stool of community development, which includes the government, includes our partners, city, state, local, and it also includes our private business sector. Those are investors in nonprofits. Those are volunteers. And when you talk about being responsive and being able to tolerate economic challenges, we often don't think about the leveraging that nonprofits do in terms of their volunteer capacity.
Absolutely.
Hundreds of thousands of hours every single year happening that none of us in any sector could afford to pay for, and what that brings.
And to that point is, I like to say our nonprofit sector here is small but mighty in many ways, because 67% of the nonprofits in our study reported less than $1 million in annual revenue, and 38% of those were under $250,000. I mean, that's significant. So we're doing so much and able to make these changes in the community and do the support necessary thanks to that volunteer impact. And what's really interesting is a lot of people don't realize that, offering your time and talents to someone is whether you are, helping to support a food pantry and put food bags together, or whether you're serving on a board and bringing your accounting, legal, professional expertise of any level, business expertise to the table. All of that matters, and everything in between, and it all makes a significant difference. As a matter of fact, in the independent sector provides an annual value of volunteer time every year, and in Maryland, it's over $26 a year. Per hour, in Maryland for the value of volunteer time. That's a significant savings to those organizations.
So what do you see as the challenges that nonprofits face?
Well, I think when we look at some of the key challenges, I mean, you look at it from a few key perspectives, and it's just like any business. So I'd really sort of just echo back to that. The same kinds of challenges, financial challenges. Can you earn the revenue that you need, not only to meet the needs that you're currently addressing, but to, respond to the long list of other challenges in a community. We know that about 92% of the organizations in our region depend on individual giving. As tax laws change and, sort of motivations for giving might alter over time, we really need to help highlight that it is critically important to continue to donate that $10, that $25, that $50. We also see that raising sort of the non-sexy, unrestricted money, but what really helps pay electric bills, help pay staffing, pay rent, those are things that are vital to any business. Same is true for nonprofits. And then we have the human resource challenge. You think about, trying to find the people to meet the needs of your business, and can you find the professional expertise and the talent here? And then lastly, sort of, all of those sort of external challenges that any business is looking at. What's going going on in the stock market, what's going on internationally, what's going on with the latest virus that might be floating around. All those things impact a business just like ours.
Yeah, and to that end, I think that there's this misnomer in the general public about the admin rate of an organization, of a nonprofit, and I think that there can be some perception that nonprofits, should, and no doubt, run as leanly as possible, for sure, because our mission is to have those dollars that we have create impact in the community and help others. However, if we're not keeping the lights on, and if we're not able to pay a competitive salary for the talent, that we have, and be able to keep those folks focused in our sector and not lose them basically to higher paying jobs in the for-profit sector, we're also doing ourselves a disservice. It's great to have amazing, impactful programs, but it takes talent to do that. It takes professionals to do that, just like in any other organization. And we actually got to participate together in the JA Inspire event last week, and we had a really cool operation booth there for students to see hands-on that anything pretty much you want to do in the for-profit world, that's relevant in the nonprofit world too. You can have a career, but we also have to make sure that we're making that interesting, exciting, and also make it an affordable living for people. We have nonprofits ourselves who are also Alice, just like the category of folks who are struggling to make ends meet. We have to understand that it's important to be able to invest in ourselves so that we can be sustainable and here for the future that our community needs.
Is there a particular quality to someone who, say, wants to work in the nonprofit as opposed to the profit? I mean, obviously the for-profit sector is, money. And that's the greatest attraction, but there must be something else that draws somebody to say something like the nonprofit.
Well, and I'm sure it varies depending on where you are in the country, but one of the striking details from our report is that the salaries paid within the local nonprofit sector are pretty competitive to the private sector businesses here. That being said, there are always, needs and opportunities to grow that. But I think that what really drives, and we have, some folks on our staff that have come from the private sector, and I think, everybody is driven by different things in life. But what we always hear is, and I think what, I feel and Pam and I have talked about is, you're doing something day to day that is work, but that lets you be part of something bigger. Mm-hmm. And whether you're thinking about, sort of big picture things like United Way and Community Foundation do, right down to, I want to get, food bags and backpacks for kids who are going home hungry this weekend. That is meaningful, so that when, you're not just doing finance to do finance, you're doing finance because you're helping to support, an organization that is helping people survive or helping people stay healthy. And that, it adds an element that I think is hard to identify what the dollar amount is that would bring to you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that there's a certain sort of mission feeling to somebody who becomes involved in these things?
Absolutely. I mean, you definitely, want to employ folks and have people also in volunteer capacity on your boards and those that help in the organization in any way. Not only bring a professional and personal expertise to something, but they have to also be doing so with heart, and I think it's inherent for most people in our community want to help one another. We'll hold a door for somebody, and, when we're going into the grocery store, or, we'll do anything, a small act of kindness goes a long, long way. But being able to do that on a daily basis and take that to scale, in your work it's meaningful and it's impactful, and it's very, very rewarding.
Just real briefly, Pam, how did you get involved in nonprofits?
Well, I came from the for-profit world, and a number of years ago, I've been with United Way. I'm in my 9th year, yeah. And I wanted to do something different. I really wanted to do something with meaning. And so I had the fortunate opportunity to join the United Way team, and here we are.
What kind of work did you do before?
So I started in donor relations, which was working with our donor base, moved into managing our community impact work, and then stepped into the leadership role about a year and a half ago.
Erica, what about you?
I thought that I would work for government actually when I was younger, and so that was sort of the path I was taking. And I ended up looking for work because there were government sort of cutbacks at that point, and so I started working in nonprofit. And similarly to Pam at the Community Foundation, because there's always many hats to wear, lots of work to do. You try things out and you move around, and if you stick around long enough, I guess you. But it's been a great blessing, and I think when you have that, as Pam said, every day have that element of people wanting to be part of the work they're doing. It's like nothing else, really.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Just like any business on the planet, it's still stressful.
Right.
You know, you still have those days where you're like, okay, really. But at the end of the day, you're surrounded by a group of people who are all passionate and care about the mission. The stories and the opportunities we have to engage with people who are being helped is truly what it's all about.
Well, I have to, of course, note that Delmarva Public Radio is a nonprofit,
That's
amongst
right.
other things.
And thank you so much for what you do.
And yeah, I mean, and my entire career has been with public radio in some fashion or another, so it's always been nonprofit. And people are dedicated to the mission. And yes, you're right, it does have its stresses and strains, to say the least. We've been talking with Pam Gregory. She's president and CEO of the United Way of the Lower Eastern Shore, and also Erica Joseph, president of the Community Foundation of the Eastern Shore. Appreciate you guys stopping by and chatting with us this morning.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for watching Delmarva Today, a production of Delmarva Public Radio. Production and audio engineering by Chris Rank. Hosted by Don Rush. For podcasts, visit delmarvapublicradio.net or subscribe to the Delmarva Today podcast on iTunes. You can also watch Delmarva Today on PAC 14 by tuning into Comcast Channel 14 or youtube.com/PAC 14.